Friday the 13th, 1980 review. Friday the 13th is a slasher film that launched one of the most iconic and enduring horror franchises in cinema history. Directed by Sean S. Cunningham and produced by Steve Miner, the film kicked off a cultural phenomenon, creating a blueprint for the slasher genre that would inspire numerous imitators and sequels. Its release marked the beginning of an era where horror films would become synonymous with low-budget thrills, scream queens, and a good old-fashioned villain with a vendetta. The plot. The film is set in the rural town of Crystal Lake, where a group of camp counselors is tasked with reopening Camp Crystal Lake. However, the camp has a dark history. Years ago, a young boy named Jason Voorhees drowned in the lake due to the negligence of the counselors. His mother, Pamela Voorhees, seeks revenge by murdering anyone associated with the camp. The story unfolds as the counselors begin to be picked off one by an unseen killer. What's particularly eerie about the film is the slow, methodical buildup to the killings, which culminates in a final confrontation with the killer. The movie plays with audience expectations, introducing what appears to be a typical slasher setup with a group of teenagers. But it quickly becomes clear that there's more to the story. As the body count rises, the audience is kept guessing about the identity of the killer, leading to a shocking reveal at the end. The characters. The characters are a key part of what made Friday the 13th stand out. While they are often the stereotypical horror film victims, grouped into the archetypes of the jock, the virgin, the stoner, and the promiscuous, each one adds a layer to the tension and atmosphere of the film. The counselors, played by relatively unknown actors at the time, contribute to the film's sense of realism. The audience doesn't have a lot of emotional investment in them, which makes their eventual demise more chilling. However, the character who truly leaves a lasting impression is Pamela Voorhees, the mother and the film's actual killer. Played by Betsy Palmer, Pamela is the film's surprising antagonist, and her motivations are driven by grief and loss. The reveal that she is seeking revenge for the death of her son Jason adds a tragic layer to her actions. It's also a clever twist that, at the time, subverted the typical expectations of a male slasher villain. The audience is led to believe throughout most of the movie that Jason is the killer, but the true villain turns out to be his mother, driven to madness by grief. Ta-da! Themes. At its core, Friday the 13th taps into themes of revenge, loss, and the dangers of neglect. Pamela Voorhees' quest for vengeance is rooted in the pain of losing her son, which reflects the tragic consequences of carelessness. The film also explores the fragility of life, especially in a secluded, isolated environment like the camp. It's about the terror of being cut off from the outside world, and the unknown danger that could be lurking just around the corner. The film also plays with the themes of youth and sexuality. It's no coincidence that many of the characters who engage in sexual activity are among the first to die. This moralistic undertone was prevalent in a lot of slasher films from the era, which often used the death of sexually promiscuous characters as a way to punish them for their actions. While Friday the 13th doesn't go as far as some of its contemporaries in this regard, the theme is still present. The legacy and sequels. Friday the 13th was a massive success both critically and commercially, grossing over $59 million on a budget of just $550,000. It spawned an entire franchise, including multiple sequels, a TV series, and an expanded universe that continues to this day. Jason Voorhees, the supposedly drowned child who returns as a supernatural killer, became a cultural icon, his hockey mask, machete, and silent menace turning him into one of the most recognizable figures in horror. The sequels are plentiful, with Jason becoming the central villain, starting with Friday the 13th Part 2, 1981. Over time, the films moved from straight horror into more of a slasher action hybrid, as Jason evolved into the relentless, unstoppable force that fans know him as today. The character became more supernatural with each film, and by the time Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives, 1986 rolled around, Jason was resurrected as an undead killer, forever cementing his place in horror folklore. In 2009, Friday the 13th was rebooted, with a new group of counselors encountering a reimagined version of Jason. While the 2009 version was less impactful than its predecessors, it revived interest in the franchise for a new generation of horror fans. The impact of Friday the 13th on pop culture is immeasurable. It influenced not only other slasher films, but also the broader genre of horror. Its central conceit, an unstoppable killer picking off a group of victims one by one, became a template for many other films, including the Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street franchises. Impact on pop culture. The franchise's impact on pop culture can't be overstated. Jason Voorhees became a fixture of horror movie culture, appearing in everything from Halloween costumes to video games. The franchise's various sequels, particularly the early ones, helped shape what we now recognize as the slasher genre. The use of suspenseful buildup, the voyeuristic point-of-view shots, and the sudden shocks became the hallmarks of slasher films that followed. The film also left its mark on horror film tropes, particularly in how the killer is presented. Pamela's appearance and later Jason's hockey mask became synonymous with slasher films. The soundtrack, particularly the eerie, haunting score by Harry Manfredini, is also a critical part of the franchise's identity. Similar movies. If you enjoyed Friday the 13th, there are several other films from the same era that you might enjoy. Halloween, 1978, is the most obvious choice, as it shares many of the same elements: a slasher villain, a group of teenagers, and a focus on suspense and tension. John Carpenter's classic introduced the world to Michael Myers, another silent, relentless killer whose impact on horror cinema is comparable to Jason's. Another film that fits in this category is A Night Nightmare on Elm Street, 1984, directed by Wes Craven. Though it features supernatural elements that Friday the 13th doesn't, A Nightmare on Elm Street still shares that same slasher vibe. The character of Freddy Krueger became just as iconic as Jason, and both films helped establish a decade-long dominance of slasher films in the horror genre. Another similar film is The Burning, 1981, which is often considered one of the more underrated slasher films of the early 80s. Though it didn't have the cultural staying power of Friday the 13th, it still follows the same basic formula of a group of teenagers being picked off by a vengeful killer. Final thoughts. In conclusion, Friday the 13th, 1980 is not just a horror film, but a cultural touchstone that helped define the slasher genre for a generation. The film introduced one of horror's most enduring icons, Jason Voorhees, and set the stage for a series of sequels, reboots, and imitations that would continue to shape horror cinema for decades. With its simple yet effective plot, memorable characters, and lasting impact on pop culture, it remains one of the most influential films in the genre.